Have you ever witnessed someone's lifetime of service and sacrifice dismissed in an instant? In a small-town bank, an 82-year-old veteran with a bronze star pinned to his chest stood quietly in line, unaware that within minutes he would be escorted out the door. All because a young cashier failed to recognize the significance of his military ID and Medal of Valor. But respect has a way of finding its champions. 10 minutes later, a convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside the bank. The glass doors swung open as 4 former Navy SEALs walked in with purposeful strides. They weren't there to make a deposit. They were there to make a point about honor. This is the story of Arthur Monroe, a man who had faced enemy fire in combat only to face disrespect decades later in the most unexpected place. His Bronze Star, awarded for acts of heroism during intense combat operations, gleamed on his lapel as he entered Willow Creek's main bank branch that morning. Each visit was part of his routine: deposit his pension, exchange pleasantries with the staff who knew him, and return home. Simple, dignified, ordinary. Except today would prove anything but ordinary. What unfolded next would become a powerful reminder that some bonds transcend time, that brotherhood forged in service never truly fades, and that sometimes justice arrives wearing civilian clothes instead of uniforms. Before I continue this incredible story, I want to ask, have you ever stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves? Would you have the courage to confront an entire institution if you saw someone being disrespected? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you believe our veterans deserve better than what Arthur experienced that day. Now, let's go back to that fateful morning in Willow Creek. Arthur Monroe had never considered himself a hero. At 82, his weathered hands told stories his lips rarely shared. He'd served in Vietnam with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, where he earned his Bronze Star during an ambush that claimed the lives of 3 men in his unit. The official citation described how Staff Sergeant Monroe, despite being wounded himself, had carried a fellow soldier through heavy enemy fire to safety, returning twice more to retrieve others. The Bronze Star with the V device for valor wasn't just metal pinned to his lapel. It represented the darkest day of his life and the moment he found strength he never knew he possessed. Arthur wore it not for pride, but as a silent tribute to those who never came home. After returning from war, Arthur built a modest life in Willow Creek. He taught high school history for 30 years before retiring, quietly imparting wisdom to generations without ever mentioning his own place in history. His wife Margaret had passed 5 years ago, leaving him alone in the small bungalow they'd shared for decades. Every second Tuesday, Arthur followed the same routine: breakfast at the corner diner, a walk through Veterans Memorial Park, and then to the bank to deposit his pension check. He preferred in-person banking to ATMs or mobile apps. The brief human connections meant something to a man living alone. Arthur stood straight despite his years, his posture betraying his military background. His silver hair remained neatly trimmed in a short style not far removed from regulation cut. Deep-set blue eyes reflected both kindness and resolution under bushy white eyebrows. His hands, marked with liver spots and prominent veins, moved with deliberate precision, whether signing his name or straightening his tie. He dressed formally for bank visits, pressed slacks, polished shoes, and a navy blazer that hung slightly loose on his thinning frame. The Bronze Star and his 173rd Airborne pin were always affixed perfectly, though he rarely drew attention to them. The tellers at Willow Creek Bank had known Arthur for years. They called him Mr. Monroe with genuine respect, occasionally asking about his garden or commenting on the weather. These small courtesies and recognition of his presence gave his routine meaning. But retirement and staff changes at the bank had brought new faces who didn't know the quiet man with military bearing. To them, he was just another elderly customer. His medal merely decorative, his military ID card unfamiliar, his dignified patience possibly mistaken for confusion. As Arthur approached the bank that Tuesday morning, he adjusted his collar and straightened his medal out of habit, unaware that today's visit would be anything but routine. The glass doors of Willow Creek Bank parted with a soft hiss as Arthur stepped into the cool, climate-controlled interior. Tuesday morning meant fewer customers, just the way he preferred it. The familiar scent of coffee from the complimentary station mingled with the clean, corporate smell of polished floors and furniture polish. Arthur nodded at the security guard, who returned the gesture with a quick, "Morning, sir." He took his place in line, third from the counter, and glanced at his watch. 9:17 a.m., right on schedule. He clutched his pension check in one hand, his wallet ready in the other. At the far end of the teller counter stood Marlon Davies, 23, 3 weeks into his first job after community college. His training had focused primarily on transaction procedures and fraud prevention, with little emphasis on customer relations or community knowledge. His crisp blue shirt still had the stiff look of newness, his employee name tag slightly askew on his chest pocket. As the line moved forward, Marlon's window became available. Arthur approached with measured steps. "Good morning," Arthur said, placing his check and ID card on the counter. "I'd like to deposit this, please." Marlon glanced up briefly, his eyes flickering over Arthur's face before dropping to the check. "I'll need to see some identification," he said without looking up again. "It's right there," Arthur replied, tapping his military ID card with one finger. "Same one I always use." Marlon picked up the card, turning it over with a frown. "This isn't a driver's license," he said. His tone carried an edge of impatience. "No, it's my military identification. I've used it here for years." Arthur's voice remained even, though his spine straightened slightly. "We prefer state-issued ID," Marlon replied, sliding the card back across the counter. His eyes briefly noticed the medal on Arthur's jacket but registered no recognition. "Young man, this is a government-issued identification card. It's perfectly valid." Arthur's fingers rested on the edge of the counter, steady despite his age. Marlon sighed, the small sound carrying dismissal. "Look, I'm just following procedure. Do you have another form of ID?" The customer in line behind Arthur shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension building. Arthur reached for his wallet again, movements deliberately measured. "I've been banking here for 30 years, he said quietly. "My military ID has always been sufficient." Marlon's eyes narrowed as he glanced at his computer screen. "I don't see any notes about alternative ID acceptance in your account." His fingers tapped impatiently on the keyboard. "Perhaps you should call your manager," Arthur suggested, maintaining his composure. Marlon hesitated, then pressed a button beneath his counter. His eyes drifted to Arthur's bronze star, but the medal might as well have been a decorative pin for all the recognition it received. "What's that for anyway?" Marlon asked, gesturing vaguely toward Arthur's chest. The question landed like a physical blow. Arthur's weathered hand moved instinctively to touch the medal. "This is a bronze star with valor device," he explained, his voice dropping slightly. "It's awarded for heroism in combat." "Oh," Marlon replied, his tone flat with disinterest. "Anyway, without proper ID, I can't process this transaction." Before Arthur could respond, a man in a charcoal suit approached from an office door. "Is there a problem here, Marlon?" The name tag identified him as Dennis Blackwell, branch manager. "This gentleman is trying to use a non-standard ID," Marlon explained quickly. "I told him we need state-issued identification." Dennis barely glanced at Arthur or his medal before addressing him. "Sir, I'm afraid we do have protocols we need to follow. If you could come back with a driver's license or state ID." Arthur's face remained composed, but something in his eyes dimmed. The dismissal wasn't just of his identification. It was of everything the medal on his chest represented. "Mr. Blackwell," Arthur began, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. "This is a federal government-issued identification card. It contains all the security features of any state ID. My photograph, date of birth, and identification number." The manager barely glanced at the card. "Our policy requires state-issued identification for all transactions. I'm sorry, but I must insist." "I've banked here for decades," Arthur said. "Ask Mrs. Reynolds or Mr. Thompson. They've helped me many times." "They're not in today," Blackwell replied curtly. "And regardless of past practices, we must follow current protocol." A woman in line spoke up. "Excuse me, but that's clearly a military ID. My husband uses his all the time." Blackwell turned to her. "Ma'am, please wait your turn." Then back to Arthur. "Sir, I need to ask you to step aside so we can assist other customers." Arthur felt a weight pressing against his chest that had nothing to do with his age. It was the familiar ache of invisibility, The same feeling he'd experienced when returning home from Vietnam to a country that looked right through him. He'd endured it then with stoic resolve. He would do so again. "I understand," Arthur said, gathering his check and ID with dignified movements. "Though I must say, in all my years, I never expected to be treated this way at my own bank." Blackwell's expression hardened. "Sir, if you're going to be difficult, I'll have to ask you to leave the premises." Difficult. The word hung in the air between them. Arthur looked at the younger man, wondering what he saw. Just an elderly nuisance? A relic? Certainly not a man who had carried wounded comrades through gunfire, who had buried friends and carried their memories for decades. "I'm simply trying to conduct my banking business," Arthur said. "Without proper identification, that's not possible," Blackwell insisted. "Now please, I must ask you to exit the building." Arthur noticed the security guard approaching, a young man who couldn't be more than 30, looking uncomfortable with the situation. "That won't be necessary," Arthur said quietly. "I can find my own way out." He buttoned his blazer, a motion practiced thousands of times through military routine and civilian habit. The bronze star caught the fluorescent light, a small flash of recognition for sacrifice that meant nothing in this moment. As Arthur turned to leave, he felt eyes on him, some curious, others embarrassed, a few indignant on his behalf. His back remained straight, his gait measured. Dignity, after all, couldn't be taken, only surrendered. The security guard held the door, murmuring, "Sorry about this, sir," as Arthur passed. Outside, the autumn air felt sharp in his lungs. Arthur paused on the sidewalk, his hand unconsciously finding the metal on his chest, a touchstone to a time when what he did mattered, when who he was commanded respect. For the first time in many years, Arthur Monroe felt truly alone with his memories, standing outside a place that no longer recognized their worth. 3 blocks from the bank, the morning crowd at Riley's Diner included 4 men gathered around a corner booth. Coffee mugs steamed before them as they leaned in, discussing the upcoming Veterans Outreach Program. Leading the conversation was Garrick Lawson, 47, former Navy SEAL with 3 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. His calm demeanor and measured speech carried natural authority. Beside him sat Marcus Chen, who'd served alongside Garrick in SEAL Team 6, Devin Williams, retired Force Recon Marine, and Jackson Hayes, another former SEAL who now ran the County Veterans Support Center. These men gathered weekly, part friendship, part informal support network for local veterans. The bell above the diner door chimed as Kate Miller rushed in, her phone in hand. Kate, a bank teller from the branch across town, had just received a text from her friend who worked at Willow Creek Bank. "Garrick," she called, approaching their table. "Something's happening at the main branch. They just kicked out Mr. Monroe, you know, the older gentleman with the bronze star?" Garrick's coffee mug stopped midway to his lips. "Arthur Monroe? Vietnam, 173rd Airborne? That's him. Jenny says they refused his military ID and had security walk him out. She's furious, but couldn't do anything." The 4 men exchanged glances, a silent communication born from years of operating as a unit. Garrick placed his mug down with deliberate calm. "Where is he now?" Jackson asked. "Outside the bank, according to Jenny, just standing there." Devin pulled out his wallet, dropping cash on the table. "Let's go." "Keys," Garrick said, holding out his hand. Marcus tossed him a set of SUV keys without hesitation. Within moments, the 4 men were heading toward their vehicles, 2 black SUVs parked side by side. No shouting, no dramatic declarations, just purposeful movement and resolve. Would you stand by watching if someone disrespected a veteran in your community? Or would you take action? Think about it while I tell you what happened next. If this story resonates with you, hit that like button right now and subscribe to hear more accounts of justice for our veterans. Sometimes the most powerful moments happen when people choose to stand together against disrespect. Now let's see what happened when these former Navy SEALs decided to pay the bank a visit. Arthur had barely taken 10 steps from the bank entrance when the low rumble of engines caught his attention. 2 black SUVs pulled to the curb with precision, parking in tandem. No squealing tires, no dramatic skids, just deliberate, controlled movement. The doors opened simultaneously as 4 men emerged. They wore no uniforms, but their bearing announced their military background as clearly as any insignia. Garrick led them, his stride purposeful but unhurried. Each man wore casual civilian clothes, jeans and polo shirts or button-downs, yet they moved with coordinated efficiency born from years of operating as a unit. "Mr. Monroe," Garrick called, his voice carrying just enough to reach Arthur without shouting. "A moment of your time, sir?" Arthur turned, surprise registering briefly before recognition dawned. "Garrick Lawson, it's been a while." The men converged, forming a loose semicircle around Arthur. No words were wasted on unnecessary questions. Kate had briefed them on the situation. "We'd like to address this matter," Garrick said simply. "With your permission." Arthur hesitated, then nodded once. "I wasn't looking to cause trouble." "No trouble, sir," Marcus responded. "Just clarification." The 5 men turned toward the bank entrance. Through the glass doors, customers and staff watched with curious expressions. Devon held the door, allowing Arthur to enter first, a small gesture of respect that spoke volumes. Inside, the ambient bank noise quieted immediately. Garrick spotted Dennis Blackwell watching from behind the teller counter, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. "Mr. Blackwell," Garrick said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the lobby. "I believe we need to discuss your bank's policy regarding military identification." Blackwell approached cautiously. "I'm sorry, who are you gentlemen?" "Garrick Lawson, former Navy SEAL. These are my colleagues, all veterans. This gentleman," he gestured to Arthur, "is Staff Sergeant Arthur Monroe, Bronze Star recipient, 173rd Airborne Brigade." Jackson stepped forward. "We understand there was some confusion about the validity of military identification for banking purposes." Blackwell's posture stiffened defensively. "We have protocols regarding acceptable forms of ID. Federal law recognizes military identification as valid for all financial transactions," Marcus stated, his tone matter-of-fact rather than confrontational. "The Service Members Civil Relief Act specifically addresses this." Devon added, "The Bronze Star with Valor device that Mr. Monroe wears isn't decorative. It's awarded for heroism in combat under fire." Customers had stopped their transactions, watching the exchange. Marlin, the young teller, had gone pale behind his counter. "This isn't about making a scene," Garrick continued, his voice level. "This is about ensuring that men and women who serve this country receive the respect and consideration they've earned." Blackwell glanced around, noticing the rapt attention of everyone in the bank. "Perhaps we should discuss this in my office." "I believe this is a conversation your entire staff needs to hear," Garrick replied. "Mr. Monroe has been a customer here for 30 years. Today, he was treated as an inconvenience rather than a valued member of this community." The silence in the bank grew heavier. Jackson reached into his pocket and produced his own military ID. "This card represents a commitment made by men and women willing to give everything for their country. It deserves recognition." Blackwell's expression shifted as the reality of the situation sank in. His eyes moved to Arthur's Bronze Star, then to his face. "Mr. Monroe," he said finally, "I apologize for the misunderstanding. Of course, your military ID is acceptable." He turned to Garrick. "We'll ensure all staff are properly trained regarding military identification." "And the significance of military decorations," Devon added quietly. Blackwell nodded, chastened. "Yes, that as well." "Mr. Monroe's transaction?" Garrick prompted. "I'll handle it personally," Blackwell assured them. "Right away." Throughout the exchange, the veterans had maintained perfect composure. No raised voices, no threats, no ultimatums. Their power came not from intimidation but from the quiet authority of men accustomed to being heard when they spoke. As Blackwell guided Arthur to his office, the normal sounds of the bank gradually resumed, though subdued and respectful. The lesson had been delivered without a single harsh word. In the privacy of his office, Blackwell's professional facade crumbled. Face to face with Arthur and Garrick, the reality of his actions became clear. "Mr. Monroe, I deeply regret how you were treated today," Blackwell said, his voice genuine for the first time. "There's no excuse for failing to recognize both your military ID and what that medal represents." Arthur nodded, his expression guarded but softening. "This incident has revealed serious gaps in our training," Blackwell continued. "I'm committing to implementing a comprehensive program for all staff about military identification and honors." He turned to his computer, typing quickly. "I've just emailed our regional director requesting resources for this initiative." Marlon appeared at the doorway, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Monroe, I want to apologize too. I didn't understand. I should have asked for help instead of dismissing your ID." Arthur studied the young man's face. "We all have things to learn," he said finally. "Thank you for acknowledging that." Outside the office, the other veterans waited, exchanging quiet conversation with curious customers who'd witnessed the confrontation. Several older patrons approached to share their own military connections. A father who served in Korea, a brother in Desert Storm. When Arthur emerged from the office, transaction completed, Marcus clapped him gently on the shoulder. The simple gesture, one soldier to another, conveyed more than words could express. "Let's get some coffee," Jackson suggested. As they moved toward the exit, 2 police cruisers pulled up outside, responding to a call from a concerned customer who'd misinterpreted the situation. Officer Rodriguez entered, hand resting cautiously on his belt. "Everything okay here?" "Just a misunderstanding that's been resolved," Garrick explained, extending his hand. "Former SEAL Team 6, these gentlemen are all veterans." The officer relaxed immediately. "My father was a Marine, Vietnam, 68. 173rd Airborne, 67, Arthur replied. A connection instantly formed. After a brief explanation, Officer Rodriguez nodded respectfully to Arthur. "Sir, would you like to file a formal complaint?" Arthur glanced at Blackwell, who stood nearby, genuinely contrite. "No," he decided. "I believe the situation has been addressed adequately." As they exited the bank together, 5 men of different ages, united by service, customers and staff alike watched with newfound respect. By evening, the incident at Willow Creek Bank had spread throughout the town. Local news station WCRK ran a segment featuring a statement from the bank's regional director. "We deeply regret the disrespect shown to Mr. Monroe, a decorated veteran who has served our country with distinction. This incident does not reflect our values or our commitment to the community. We are implementing immediate changes to ensure nothing like this happens again." The bank's public apology included specific actions: mandatory training for all employees on recognizing military identification and understanding the significance of service medals, a new express service line dedicated to veterans and active military personnel, and a substantial donation to the local Veterans Support Center. For Marlon, the experience became transformative. The following week, he attended a specialized training session conducted by Jackson Hayes at the Veterans Center. "I never understood what these medals actually meant," Marlon admitted to the group of bank employees gathered for training. "Now I realize each one tells a story of sacrifice." Jackson nodded. "That bronze star means Arthur Monroe risked his life to save others under enemy fire. Every decoration has a similar story behind it." Meanwhile, community support for Arthur and other local veterans surged. The town's quarterly newsletter featured an article explaining common military decorations and their significance. Local businesses began offering veteran discounts, prominently displaying signs welcoming those who served. Arthur himself found unexpected recognition. During his next visit to his regular diner, he received a standing ovation from patrons who had heard about the incident. Though initially uncomfortable with the attention, he gradually recognized its importance, not for himself, but for what it represented. "It's not about me," he explained to a local reporter who requested an interview. "It's about remembering that behind every veteran is a story of service that deserves respect." The most significant change occurred at Willow Creek High School, where administrators instituted a new program inviting veterans to share their experiences with students. Arthur, who had rarely spoken about his service, agreed to participate. "For decades, I kept these stories private," he told Garrick over coffee. Perhaps that was a mistake. The younger generation needs to understand what these medals truly mean. Have you ever misjudged someone before learning their full story? How might our communities change if we took time to understand the significance behind symbols like military medals? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more content honoring those who served. Your engagement helps these important stories reach more people who need to hear them. 1 month after the incident, Arthur sat in the warmth of the Veterans Hall, surrounded by photographs spanning decades of service. The weekly gathering had swelled to twice its usual size. with veterans from across 3 counties now attending regularly. "I never expected any of this," Arthur confided to Garrick, as they watched young veterans mingling with those who had served in Vietnam and Korea. "All I wanted that day was to deposit my check." "Sometimes the most important changes come from unexpected moments," Garrick replied. "Look around. This room hasn't been this full in years." The incident at Willow Creek Bank had indeed sparked something larger than anyone anticipated. 3 local banks had jointly developed new training protocols for recognizing military identification and understanding the significance of service medals. The town council had passed a resolution promoting veteran awareness in all public services. Most meaningful to Arthur was the school program that had emerged. Twice monthly, veterans visited classrooms to share their experiences and the values that guided their service. Students learned to recognize not just medals and ribbons, but the human stories they represented. The young cashier, Marlin, "He came to visit me last week," Arthur mentioned, his weathered hands cradling a coffee mug. "Brought homemade cookies from his mother. Said he's applying to join the reserves." "That's the real victory," Marcus commented from across the table. "Not just being treated with respect ourselves, but passing on what service truly means." For Arthur Monroe, the legacy of that confrontation wasn't found in apologies or policy changes. It lived in renewed connections between generations, between civilians and military, between past service and present understanding. The following Tuesday, Arthur entered Willow Creek Bank as usual. This time, 3 tellers greeted him by name. His bronze star caught the light as he completed his transaction, not as a forgotten relic, but as a recognized symbol of sacrifice understood by everyone present. Respect isn't merely about recognition. It's about acknowledging the full weight of another person's journey. For our veterans, that journey often carries burdens invisible to the casual observer. The medals they wear tell stories most civilians will never fully comprehend, but that we must always honor. If this story has touched you, please take a moment to thank a veteran in your community. Their service deserves our respect, not just on designated holidays, but every day. Subscribe to hear more stories that celebrate courage, honor, and the bonds that unite those who serve. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder about the importance of recognizing sacrifice when we see it. Because sometimes respect is the most powerful form of gratitude we can offer.